Good morning and welcome to this Construction Management and BIM Plus webinar. The session is entitled Understanding the Revised Information Management Mandate in association with Ideagen Mail Manager. Our programme today, the Information Management Mandate, is undergoing revision ahead of implementation this autumn. You'll hear firsthand how and why the mandate is being revised. The revised mandate promises to be data-driven and focused on whole life. In the second half, Ideagen Mail Manager will focus on an often neglected part of information management, email management. There'll be a Q&A session at the end. Let me introduce our speakers this morning. Dr. Anne Kemp, OBE, Chair of NEMA and Technical Director at Atkins Realis. Her colleague Alex Backhouse, Senior Programme Manager from Atkins Realis, and Hugh Knipe, Senior Client Manager from Ideagen Mail Manager. I'm Justin Stanton, Editor of BIM Plus and contributor to Construction Management. I'm your chair today. Oops, make sure that works. There we go. As ever, before we dive into the webinar, there's a bit of housekeeping. Please use the Q&A function to ask questions, not the chat function. Please use the Q&A. You can pose questions as yourself or anonymously. Our panelists will address your questions in the Q&A session at the end. The webinar is being recorded and will be available to watch on demand via the original registration link later today. There's 1 hour's CPD credit for those who complete this webinar live. CPD certificates will be issued later today or probably tomorrow. So that's enough of me and enough of that. I'll stop sharing my screen, and Anne and Alex, it's over to you if you want to turn on your cameras and microphones and prepare to share your screen.
Well, thank you, Justin. Okay, so thank you ever so much for inviting us today to talk about the review of the Information Management Mandate. We're really pleased to have this opportunity to talk with you, and more importantly, to encourage you to have your say. Next slide, Alex, please. So what we want to cover today is to just give you a little bit more background as to the problem statement, why we're looking at this review at the moment and a revision of the IM mandate. So I'll go quickly through an overview of the BIM journey. I think quite a few of you today will be very familiar with that. But to look at, well, where are we today, the current state, and where the transformed state, what we're really targeting. Alex will then tell you a little bit more about what we're doing and how we're doing it and where we've got to so far. And then we will present to you what the overall approach is being proposed to be and what we're consulting on at the moment. And Alex is going to very skillfully take us through a couple of Slido questions where you'll be able to see the general audience response. We're really keen to have your say, so we will be providing links for an expression of interest a bit later on. Okay, so if we move on to the next slide, Alex. So why are we here? And well, what is the problem statement? So some of you will be very familiar with the original mandate and what exists at the moment. But we were challenged as a Construction Leadership Council data and digital stream in the summer, actually, by Fergus Harradence of the Department of Business and Trade, saying he didn't feel that there was really a mandate which addressed our current challenges and where we need to head for the future. So would we look at this again? The reason why it was a Construction Leadership Council was approached is that is a collaboration between government and industry. And one of the chairs, the deputy chair, is Richard Robinson, who is the CEO of Atkins Realis UK and Ireland. So fortunately with that, and you'll be familiar that I've been working within this field for quite a while, I've been lucky that I've had a backup as well from the likes of Alex and other colleagues to help on this. But really the challenge was set to us that you know, the current mandate hasn't ever formally been mandated by government. It's pretty buried within the Transforming Infrastructure Performance report, 2030 and roadmap. And there's a lot of people who aren't aware of it at the moment. It's not being enforced through procurement, planning, regulation, or operations and maintenance. I would like to say there are people who are working to it, and we respect that completely. But that challenge was taken very seriously. There's also the issue being raised that the current mandate focuses on information. It doesn't really emphasize data and information. And some of the views that we've heard are that that means that PDFs become a bit of an analog escape route, if you like, for avoiding actually looking at the data itself. There's also the charge that the current mandate doesn't cover all phases of the built and managed environment. That is something that I would challenge. The intent is that it does, but if that's the continued understanding, clearly the communication around it isn't right. So we need to look at that. Then there's a feedback coming through, and as an example, there's the NBS Digital Construction Report, that actually industry is only part way through its digital transformation, and some haven't yet to actually start at the moment. And there's various reports that are reflecting that at the moment, is that, yeah, there has been some good uptake, but it's not good enough. And then the other charge that has been levelled is that the current mandate, indeed the original mandate, didn't go far enough in helping to explain the how for different personas across the whole of the built and the managed environment. It was left very much open for interpretation. And I think this is fair. It was largely focused on the client's role. So that's a problem statement which was really posed to us, and to be fair, has actually been reflected in the early consultations that we were undertaking. So let's look at the next slide. So as an overview, I think there'll be a lot of people on the call who are familiar that in 2011, although there were a lot of concerns coming up with various reports, the Latham report and so forth, that the construction industry really needed to move forward, there wasn't a mandate around information management. And it was at this point that, as the UK, there was a progressive programme to mandate the use of fully collaborative building information modelling for government projects by 2016. Now, that was quite an extensive and funded programme, building over the next 5 years, developing BSI PASs to support this standards, and to go live in April 2016. And that had some success. Certainly from a government department perspective, there was an awful lot of work put in. But then, of course, things move on. And I was then involved very much as the convener for lifting the 1192 series, what represented BIM Level 2, to the international stage. And that's the ISO 19650 series. So in that time, we were learning a lot of lessons, weren't we, as a wider community. And that was why we moved from BIM Level 2, which wasn't really being specific enough, to actually saying, OK, we need to now take on board the 19650 series, and we'll do that through what became known as the UK BIM framework, which is supported still by BSI and now NEMA, the original UK BIM Alliance. So in 2021, there had been progress. There was still the feeling that it was more design and construction. So there was the report coming out, Transforming Infrastructure Performance, Roadmap to 2030, which included, as an annex, the Information Management Mandate, which set out requirements for improving information management using existing processes, standards, and technologies. But it has to be said, it was very much the principles directed at clients. So returning to the problem statement, which I explained to you, described to you in the first slide, we had taken very seriously the charges that really there needed to be a re-examination of the approach to enable data-driven whole life management of an integrated built environment, which is geared to serving the needs of all environment, society and business. So this is why we're now presenting to you the mandate revision 3.0, as we're calling it. Really important with all of that to say that what we want to do is to take on board all that has gone before, to respect that, to learn the lessons, and start to say, okay, what could be done better to help the whole of industry in moving forward without disrupting. I think it's really important that we emphasize we don't want to disrupt. So you'll see on this slide, we have been looking at, for instance, the Value Toolkit coming out of Project 13, the old plans of work and the current plans of work, REBA and GRIP, coming out of different parts of the industry. We have the construction playbook, the public sector, the government construction playbook, but equally there is now the private sector trust and productivity construction playbook. There's a digital data and technology playbooks, which are really extending across government, looking at the data perspective as well. And then, of course, as you're all aware, we've got things emerging like the digital twins, like the national digital twins, artificial intelligence. So there's an awful lot for us to be thinking about. How can we actually accommodate all of the challenges which industry is facing whilst having a common approach? And I think the final thing on this slide that I'd like to emphasize is we really want to be emphasizing that this is whole life. It is to embrace all of the built and managed environment and to be really thinking of the end in mind. So what the experience is like as we all use this built and managed environment and that operation and maintenance, which was one of the big criticisms, I guess, of the original mandate and BIM Level 2. And so, very obviously, one of the things that is challenging us is the Building Safety Act and what happens from that perspective from existing infrastructure. So on this slide, it's really looking at the vision of the transforming infrastructure performance and also of the Flourishing Systems report. So how we really look at that whole life, how we want to be supporting people living, working within this environment, and being able to address the specific challenges around building safety, fire safety, just as one example of the challenges that we need to face. So it really is that just as with the original mandate, we want to be looking at unprecedented improvements in productivity, carbon emissions reduction, and environmental sustainability, as well as other outcomes which may well be being identified as we go through this consultation. So where does that leave us? I think the thing also that we want to be challenging ourselves to is that this is fine to have these big visions for the overall environment, for the overall industry. But what on earth does that mean for the individual? So this is a cartoon that we developed as NEMA when we first launched as NEMA from the UK BIM Frame Alliance to really emphasize that we are looking at information and data, we are looking at whole life, but we need to be reaching out and helping right the way across what is a really complex mesh of different people working in a complex industry from different perspectives. So what we were trying to do here is to say we do want to be thinking of it from an individual perspective, so that when you're asked to fulfill the mandate or whatever it's called, there is actually a way for you to understand exactly what your first step should be and how you should then move forward to actually fulfill the requirements. So where does that leave us? There are a lot of organisations who've been looking at this over a period of time. And one of the things, as I've said earlier, is we want to be taking into account what has occurred before with the old mandates, but also these new challenges, these different perspectives that are occurring. So on this slide, just as examples, we've got the 8 data and digital principles for project success, which was developed just before this Christmas by the Infrastructure Client Group. We've got the Gemini principles on the bottom right there, developed by the National Digital Twin Programme and very much supported by the Digital Twin Hub. We want to be embracing these principles. We've obviously got the UK BIM framework, and we do see that that's key. but it will need to move along to be able to accommodate whatever the requirements are that we now we specify within this approach. And one of the changes that I think we are looking at and being asked to accommodate is the data side, the data management. And on the top right there is the example from the body of knowledge from DAMA. So you can see that there are a lot of different people, a lot of different stakeholders that we are reaching out to, that we want to understand and to try to embrace, but then simplify and converge on. So although what we'll show you in a moment may seem that, oh, it's yet another lot of principles and so forth, we are very aware of that. And what we want to understand is how to communicate that in the clearest, unambiguous way possible. So for the next slide, I'm going to hand over to Alex to tell you a little bit more about where we're at right now.
Thank you very much, Anne. Hello, everyone. So I'm going to talk through over the next few minutes the revised mandate, or revision 3.0, or as you may hear us refer to it, the approach. I'll come to why we're calling it the approach and not unambiguously the mandate in the coming slides. But essentially what I'm going to go through is how we're coming to the revised mandate, what we're doing to get there, and then talking you through the structure and the kind of core components of what's included in it, and then hopefully get everyone involved in some Slido online. So this is just a bit of an overview of the plan. So dialing into how we are tackling the approach and just showing who and what we are engaging with. So phase 1 is the phase that we're in at the moment. It's a 9-month design period before the longer phase 2 implementation. So the focus of this bit is to really engage with industry, speak to the various members that form our steering group. So our task group, who are the industry experts that represent a wide portion of the built and managed environment. Then we have our core sponsors who provide overarching direction, and then the PMO group of whom Anne and myself fit in. So the idea here is that the phase 1 sets up phase 2 for success. So the phase 2 will contain the body of the finessing and the detail, and will really outline the framework that will be implemented for the mandate. But we recognise that this is something that will need to be reactive and adaptable, as this is something that occurs over a large period of time and is not going to be possible to define it exactly at this stage in the process. There we go. So today, just to fill you in on some of the consultation that we've had so far that have helped us to converge on our thinking. So we've released an expression of interest through the Construction Leadership Council with over 60 respondents. This is the link I will share at the end of this slide deck. I really encourage those who are interested and want to get involved to respond, and then we'll be able to reach out to you and get you involved as part of that wider industry engagement stakeholder group. In terms of the consultation sessions, we've held 13 sessions of each 2 hours with various different industry bodies. And so we've got thoughts and views from over 150 individuals, which have been really good to challenge the task group and the PMO's thinking, and to make sure that we are developing this in the right direction. And so then we've got a number of upcoming planned events, including Digital Construction Week and the NEMA virtual conference. We're also updating progress regularly through the CLC Construction Leadership Council newsletters, and then we're sharing an updated consultation product to those involved in the stakeholder groups, which really dial into the detail of what I'm about to go into next. I think the thing to emphasize is that we're not working in a vacuum here, and it's really important that we do engage the wide industry that we represent, to make sure that we don't fall into pitfalls of focusing in or overemphasizing the importance of specific user groups or parts of the construction cycle. So I'm going to spend a few minutes dialing into the overall approach. So I'll talk you through it, and then Anne, feel free to jump in as needed. But at the start, to emphasise that this is still very much a working product. We are consulting, but we are also converging on a product that we are getting more comfortable with, and that will eventually be shared as part of the end of phase plan. So we've got 4 distinct blocks here. The first 2, the black and the red, those are the ones that Anne and myself are focusing in on the here and now. So the call for action and the mandate. So I'll talk through those first, and then the latter 2 will be the components of phase 2. So the framework and the resources that we envisage go with it. So in terms of the overall approach, why are we not calling it a mandate? So we notice we have 2 larger uncertain events, or one main large uncertain event here that may hinder this being published as a mandate, and that's the general election. So we can't guarantee that we will get government buy-in, or that we will get government buy-in at a point in time that aligns with this timescale. So that's why we've called the overall document here the call for action. So it'll either be a mandate, or if not a mandate, we've got there possibly a charter or agreement. So the idea that it would be a voluntary scheme that organizations, industry bodies or institutes sign up to, and then through that we get kind of a build through the people who actually are involved in the data and information ecosystem. And so here we think it's really important to say what the vision and the benefits are, because ultimately to use this, people need to be able to articulate why it's got value. And so that's what Anne talked about earlier in terms of productivity, carbon reduction, sustainability. And so really teasing that out, making sure it's very clear. And the main thing for this section is that we will include overarching principles. So the principles here are essentially behavior-led outcomes that give people overall guidance. And so the slide that you previously saw that Anne showed were extracts of some of the principles that have come before. And so we've been working with our consultation groups, and these are the elements that are most developed. And we found through organic consultation that we've actually aligned quite neatly with some of the content that's come before, which really emphasizes the importance of looking at what's come before, and also the fact that we will go on to rationalize our thinking with the body of knowledge that it already exists. As Anne said, we don't want to try and make more conflicting advice. We want to try and build and enhance what's already there and work with industry. The second component of this is a high-level roadmap. So this is envisaged as a simple tool where industry or organizations can quickly pin their level of maturity to see where they are in terms of data and information. And it's a simple tool and guide that they can use. And essentially the high-level vision statement of where the industry can get to. So the second part, the mandate. This one's called the mandate as we envisage. If it's called a mandate, these will be mandated anyway. If it's a charter or agreement, then the organizations, industry bodies, institutes that sign up and champion this would mandate this to their members. So essentially we're getting the individuals who are involved in the data and information ecosystem to sign up to essentially overarching specific rules. Again, this is where we're really focusing with our stakeholder groups at the moment to see if we want to make these smart and how all-encompassing and specific we make them, with the acknowledgement that we don't want to make this too prohibitive. We want to make sure that it's inclusive and is relevant to all members of the built environment industry. And that's why you'll see in the text box down in the framework, we have specific rules, with the idea being that these are where you get the specificity and address the individual needs for the different user groups. And so the framework essentially will allow the flexibility to fulfill the mandate dependent on the user's capability, their industry needs, and their technology advances. And it's recognized that this isn't going to occur overnight. And this is where we will need to focus in on the guidance and the roadmap. The roadmap here is very much focusing on the specifics. How does someone use the content of information there to end up at the right level of maturity that they need for their organization. And then finally, the resources, so the how-to guides, just making it very user-friendly. I think that's something that we've noted and has come through strongly in previous consultation, is that there's not always the advice or the clarity to get you through these documents, and you tend to need to be a professional or a very educated person to get through them. And noting that not every industry body, company or person involved in the data and information space will be a specialist information manager or data manager or involved in that space. So making it, again, inclusive. Anne, do you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, and I guess the main thing to emphasise at the moment is that this isn't funded. It's pro bono, voluntary. Fortunately, Atkins has provided some resource to support me in this and Construction Leadership Council, but the steering group, the task group are volunteering at the moment. I think the important thing is when we're describing the roadmaps, you wouldn't be surprised that I would want to emphasize that what we're wanting to do is to make this possible for everybody in the industry to move forward wherever they are on their journey. So if they're not aware of what their requirements are because they're actually still more in a document mode, we then give them a guide, tools, advice to be able to progress them. So there is this balance between what is required and what is being, this is the way for you to move forward. So we don't want to impinge a requirement which will be impossible for a large part of the industry to engage in. So there is that progressive development. Quite how we do that, so if I could put it as crudely, people don't cheat, is one of the challenges we have. And I have to say, with the consultations, some of the most challenging criticism, if you like, is really helpful. We want to hear that. We don't know that we've got this right yet. We want to test this and see what would be the most, I suppose, democratic way of getting this to work, to actually work in principle. And this is where I think the mandate is a tricky one, because from a government perspective, they're saying, you know what, really, we can't mandate. We've called it a mandate, but it doesn't really have the teeth. So if you can get organizations, professional institutions to sign up to a charter or an agreement, and then within their sphere of influence or authority, they can then mandate for their members or their employees that they need to now follow these rules, overarching rules, which are, and then specific rules, which may be for relevant to a planner, maybe relevant to a maintenance crew, maybe relevant to the plumber, maybe relevant to the regulator. That's where we would then like to be working at how the framework makes it easier for a specific role to understand what it does. And that it's not that this time with the BIM level 2, I think there was a mistake that it was almost like everybody had to know everything about BIM level 2. And that was one of the blockers. Whereas if we can be much more specific and instruct people about this is what you need to do. So yes, the specialists will know about the standards and they'll know how to apply them and develop guides and tools, but we wouldn't be expecting the vast majority of the industry to do that. So I think the thing is that we want to make the actions relevant and of benefit to the vast majority. So that's not easy, but that's what we're targeting at. And then the final point is to say we haven't got resources and funding yet identified. That will be a part of what we do here, is what the plan is, what the need for resources and funding would be. So what is actually achieved moving forward from phase 1 is not yet known. So we will be saying the framework would be able to achieve this if there was the resources and funding made available, but actually also that there is a program to it. And that's why we've got the roadmap. It's the art of the possible. The UK BIM framework will need to change and adapt. And I think we had ambitions anyway to go further, but we are limited because we only have the voluntary resource. If this approach is going to go forward, then hopefully we will be able to get government industry support and be able to move forward in a more comprehensive manner. And I think finally then the resources is that hopefully it would then be clearer to people who could contribute how helpfully to develop how-to guides and tools on iPhones and so forth, that it becomes, as I say, a more democratic process, if you like. So I think, Alex, if I hand over to you, that's probably more than enough to move into a Slido.
I was going to say, yeah, so oh, there we go. So I'm going to welcome everyone quickly because I think we will be pushing for time. If everybody's able, either on their phones, take a a photo of this, and your QR code option should come up. Or if Justin, I think you're able to share the link in the chat for people to do it, so they can get on their laptops.
Yeah, I've done that, Alex. So yeah, if anyone
Amazing.
wants to find the URL in the chat function right now.
Just encourage everyone to join. It should be a very quick, easy, and hopefully a visual way to see what's what everybody else thinks. I'll give it a couple more seconds and then I will go live with it. Have people been able to join that? There we go. So again, just to say, this is I think you're limited on word counts. So, and if you see people's words that you think, yeah, I really agree with that, please do copy it. There's no need to be fully unique, because the idea is this: more people who say a specific word, the more it comes to the top, and it helps us kind of sift through number of interactions.
So we've got some positive comments. I think that the cautious, the confused, the unclear can totally understand that, because we haven't actually told you what the principles and the rules are. So this is only a summary of the approach, in as much as how it could be, instead of a straight mandate, that it could get organizations to engage. What we're not saying yet, although we are using those for the consultations, is what the principles and the rules could be. But to simplify it, you could say, okay, it's to follow the UK BIM framework, which is essentially what the existing information management mandate says within the Transforming Infrastructure Performance. It says follow the UK BIM framework. So in that sense, it's following the ISO 19650. We are not sharing that right now, but I can understand why you would say it's not yet clear.
So thank you everyone for it. There's one more question that I'm going to go to quickly, otherwise I'm conscious we'll be eating into the other presenters' time here. So this is the second and final question. Maybe asking you to think a little more deeply on this one. And then whilst people are thinking, we will be sharing the link to the consultation pack, sorry, not the consultation pack, but to get involved in the consultation. So if you are interested and want to find more, that's a really good way to see some of the thinking and the current overarching principles, roadmap, rules, etc., that the task group and PMO are working on, and to get an inside track into where this is going.
And just for the record, everyone, I've just pasted that link that Alex mentioned. I've pasted that into the chat function, and we'll also flag it again at the end as a shorter bit.ly link as well.
Thank you very much, Justin.
So I think we can hold off with the Slido as soon as you wish, Justin, in the interest of time.
Yeah. Okay.
We just have, I think, a final slide, don't we, Alex, which is sharing.
It was just what Justin had asked for in terms of a call for the for people who are interested to fill out that form and link. But no, thank you very much everyone for engaging in that Slido, and Justin, I'll hand over to you.
So yeah,
the Slido
I think,
remains live.
And just to really emphasise is we are asking for input, that the clarity for a mandate or whatever, the specific rules will be really important. And so if we can get to specific rules for a particular role, job, then that would be what would be mandated. It wouldn't be just a broad brush organisations must fulfill the UK BIM framework. So that's what we're really trying to do, is to be more specific in what that mandate would be. So yeah, please, if you are interested in feeding in, do fill in the expression of interest and have your say. Thank you, Justin.
Thanks, Anne. Thanks, Alex. Thank you very much. Okay, if you can switch your cameras and mics off, and I'll ask Hugh and his colleague Stacey to take us into the next section.
Great, thank you, Anne and Alex. Really insightful, kind of really good to kind of know where the path forward of BIM is going. So, as mentioned earlier, my name is Hugh Knipe. If we can go to the next slide, please, Stacey. Great. And I work with AEC businesses globally to help them unify their project information. So if we move into the next slide, this kind of runs through the current state of play. So as I'm sure everyone's aware, the technology landscape globally is changing at an ever-increasing speed. And this is kind of no different within the AEC industries trying to keep up with all the new regulations. I'm sure you've all noticed that in your own work, technology is continuing to rapidly evolve and drive the AEC to become safer, cheaper, and quicker. Today, there are numerous examples of how new technology is revolutionizing the sector, and these include artificial intelligence, virtual reality, and BIM. And it's no surprise that with everything going on in the world right now, and teams either working remotely or in a hybrid working environment, that it's becoming more and more difficult to access project information. AEC professionals like yourselves rely on strong, consistent communication. This might take the form of pitches, winning clients, and day-to-day communication with your colleagues. The days are gone, or at least limited, where you can turn around to the desk next to you and ask your colleagues to help you find an email, for example. What this means for a lot of people is that they don't have access to the information they need, and they are left out of the communication loop. As you can imagine, this is a huge problem. With over 347 billion emails expected to be sent and received every day in 2023, email is the most used communication and collaboration tool across the world, but it's the one thing most people manage differently, creating huge risks for the future. One of these risks comes in the form of project rework. A recent study found that 80% of project professionals spend half of their time on rework, and poor communication costs around $62 million every year on average. Rework doesn't just waste your time and money, but can cause huge communication breakdowns within your own team and also with your senior executives and stakeholders. If we can go on to the next slide, please. Great. So here at IdeaGen, we run an annual survey called the State of AEC Project Management Research Report. This aims to discover the project management and collaboration challenges faced by companies across the globe in the AEC sector. In our 2023 report, we surveyed over 550 AEC leaders, and it generally explores how firms manage their project information, where they store it, and how they go about retrieving data when facing legal disputes. It also provides insight into how the industry has been affected by the current global economy, with issues such as the cost of living crisis, supply chain issues, and the latest building regulations. If we can go into the next slide, please. So if we can jump into the main findings of the 2023 report. Firstly, we see that the majority of firms have stated that they can not easily access their project information. So we actually found that 90% of respondents were concerned about the accessibility and visibility of their project information. And over a quarter of organizations have said that they're at risk when staff leave the business. Our research has found that more and more firms are aware of the importance of filing emails as part of their offboarding process in comparison to last year, but 28% still don't require emails to be filed. And that means that those emails become more and more difficult to retrieve. And unsurprisingly, disputes are continuing to rise year on year. In our 2021 report, 63% of respondents experienced some form of dispute. Last year, that number has risen to 91%. So that's a significant increase. And with regards to the reasons for these disputes, project scope changes and payment issues are the key causes, largely because project details are often buried in emails and documents. And finally, email is still the most used communication and collaboration tool in the industry. If we can go on to the next slide, please. So in the current economic climate, we're seeing trends in the AEC where costs are on the rise, margins are tighter than ever, and there are large staff cutbacks, even within the larger global firms. They're reporting huge drop-offs in profit as their staff costs are increasing. And unfortunately, more companies are going into administration than ever. So with so much uncertainty and so many people leaving businesses, there is a huge need for organizations to start thinking about their information management. If we look at some of the stats on screen, considering 28% of businesses do not have email filing as part of their offboarding processes, and 81% of firms use email for the majority of project correspondence, thousands of firms are still at great risk of losing information. And for 88% of people we surveyed, the overall volume of emails has continued to increase in the last year, and the contents of these emails are more important than ever, with 11% of people claiming it is now business critical. And on top of this, almost 2/3 of AEC businesses regularly need to retrieve emails from past projects. For many firms, emails and keeping them well organized and accessible is not often a consideration until things go wrong. And at the end of the day, they hold vital information that could mean the difference between winning and losing a dispute, so it needs to be taken more seriously. If we can go on to the next slide, please. So our research also uncovered that only 9% of people surveyed have not experienced a dispute in the last 12 months. The top two causes were issues related to project scope changes and chasing payments. Unfortunately, for the industry, issues relating to project scope are continuing to gain momentum. Why? It's because the majority, around 85% of information relating to scope changes are stored in email and formal documents. To break this down further, 12% of project scope changes do not reside in a digital space at all. And shockingly, 11% of respondents highlighted that the only place they are kept is in a project manager's head. With findings like these, it's hardly surprising that 90% of businesses are concerned about their project information not being readily available or accessible. If you can go on to the next slide, please. We are consistently seeing that failing to make emails visible and accessible to project teams can cause issues that result in a legal dispute. According to Arcadis' 2022 Global Disputes Report, the average value of disputes was $52.6 million, with an average length of 15.4 months. Firms cannot afford to let information like email correspondence slip through the cracks. We've seen this leaky bucket of email negatively affecting AEC firms globally recently. Firms must be aware of their corporate history and be able to prove everything that has happened on projects, especially as stakes are so high. Given the nature of the industry that you operate in, firms need to guarantee information visibility and accessibility to ensure they're making the right decisions. In the best cases, poor information management costs firms money, but in the worst, it makes people unsafe. Given the size of the global disputes environment and the cost of mismanaging emails, the cost is immense, and these issues include information being locked in individuals' inboxes, staff wasting time looking for the information they need to do their job, and when staff leave the business or go on holiday, a range of the important information that they have access to is locked and trapped into their own inboxes. With proper email management processes in place, businesses can ensure that all project information and correspondence is captured and accessible by entire project teams. This will reduce the risk of rework and stop project disputes in their track. Plus, you'll have this information to hand years down the line should a liability dispute arise. So this has been a quick overview of our 2023 State of the AEC report. We'll send a full report out in the next few days if you're interested to read it in more detail. So what does this mean for information management, and how can it help you avoid disputes going forward? Luckily for us, technology advancements are continuing to improve how we work. As I touched on earlier, AEC firms are increasingly using tech to boost efficiencies. And BIM advancements means that team members can all be on the same page. And the use of BIM has seen several benefits, including reducing waste, improving collaboration, enhanced productivity, saving time on projects, and overall increasing technology adoption. It's improving safety across the industry and provides deep insights into existing buildings as well. So while all this new tech and standards like ISO 19650 are making our lives easier and really boosting the industry, we have access to a massive amount of data, both inside and outside of our organizations, that make information management incredibly difficult. This sensitive and often confidential information is typically stored in documents and correspondence, and it can be quite inaccessible, stored in disparate applications by various departments or even different offices. Information is the lifeblood of all project work, but only if it's well organized, accessible, secure, and updated. And this is no easy task. But what's the solution? You need a single place where all your project and client information is stored, so you can see the complete picture of any given project you're working on. You need a single source of truth. The single source of truth, also known as kind of the golden thread of information, is a concept based around bringing all information together, ensuring everyone in an organization has access to everything they need before making any business decisions. It's a way of providing better working methods and encouraging more transparent communication. This is helping organizations drive change faster without compromising quality, and it ensures that all project and client teams have access to the correct information they need when they need it. Managing project information in one place is critical to avoid disputes, and when done right, allows teams to use their time, resources, and knowledge to make the right decisions at the right time. The two easiest ways to create a single source of truth are by removing manual processes of information sharing and increasing information visibility across the board. So if we can go on to the next slide, please. So what we do see, and something to keep in mind, is that if your single source of truth is not complete, it's not really the truth. And what we've seen in our research report is that while firms are stringent about their documents and contracts, email is the one thing everyone manages slightly differently. And without the right tools and automation in place, project teams are left to their own devices. Some people will move their emails into other Outlook folders, some save important information to their individual desktops, and others simply delete the information if they don't see a need for it any longer. In all of these scenarios, that information is trapped in silos and inaccessible to the wider project team. Losing access to essential emails or not including them in your overall information management strategy can prove massively detrimental to firms. When emails are managed correctly, everyone in an organization has access to the information they need to make the right decisions at the right time. It provides a much better way of working, encourages more transparent communications, and ensures that all team members have access to that single source of truth. Plus, it removes the responsibility of storing and managing data from one person or a single department. If we can go on to the next slide, please. So it's time to kind of avoid these common email headaches, kind of questioning that this isn't what we agreed, having to kind of ask a client, when did you tell us this? Or kind of admitting that John or someone has left the business or on holiday, so you're coming to this a bit cold, or you don't have all the information that you need. So if we move on to the next slide. So what we see, some of the benefits of centralizing your information includes that you're able to make your data more discoverable. We can look to eliminate some of the human error through automating your workflows. It's a lot easier to establish version control. We can reduce the amount of time, especially kind of billable time, wasted on searching or recreating that rework that we touched upon earlier. You can increase transparency and traceability within the business. And to kind of go back to Anne and Alex's points, we're able to kind of help you comply with regulatory and legal requirements. And that's where Mail Manager comes in. So if we can go into the next slide. So who are kind of IdeaJet Mail Manager, and why are we talking to you all today? So I'm sure everyone on this call has heard of or even worked with Arup at one point. So for those that haven't, Arup are a global consultancy firm who have worked on design and engineering projects, including the Sydney Opera House, the Queen's Ferry crossing in Edinburgh, and more recently, the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona. So if we can go on to the next slide. So the reason I mention that is that Arup built Mail Manager around 10 years ago for their own staff internally. The reason being that they had no control over how their staff managed their emails. Yes, there were processes in place. They tried public folders, project email addresses, asking staff to manually drag and drop their emails to the server. But all of these processes relied on the individual to remember to do it, and of course, decide on what is and what isn't important, which, as you can imagine, didn't always happen. So we saw that there were kind of two main issues. One, project teams didn't have up-to-date information on their projects as a whole, especially if they were new to a project or if someone else had left the business. And the other big issue was risk, because for Arup, they had to retain their data for up to 14 years after a project had finished, in case of any claims of, in case of any claims or in case of litigation. There was always a chance that without Mail Manager, the data would be able to be found, but it would have been extremely time-consuming to do so. So if we move on to the next slide. So what Arup wanted was to find a system that would allow project teams to be able to see any email across the project within a few clicks, but we had to take away the time spent filing, and most importantly, the reliance on the user to action the email. If users had to start dragging or dropping or tagging emails again, it just wouldn't work. They needed something they could turn on overnight that would just start learning behaviors and would mean they wouldn't have to discuss email management again. They couldn't find anything that let them do that, so given the size of their IT team, they decided to write their own system. And now we're kind of working with a number of different companies across the world. Here are three of the kind of biggest clients that we have that you might have heard of. And we regularly speak to our customers about how email processes have benefited their business. And we tend to hear a kind of few key issues pop up regularly. For Gensler, the key benefits of using Mail Manager's email management software are they were able to save their users up to 5 hours per week per person in administrative printing, file coding, and hard copy filing. And we've enabled Gensler to comply with many quality assurance and statutory standards. Ramble noted that Mail Manager meant that their project information is now accessible by the wider team, even when people are on holiday or leave the business. They are confident in the fact that they will have access to all their information years down the line, and is now less time intensive to file their emails, so staff can focus on value-adding work that they enjoy. So with Mail Manager, they've seen that their staff are able to save approximately about 3 hours per week, especially for the project members and the managers, and this has allowed them to improve efficiency and productivity across its projects. And for WSP, better email management processes means that they have been able to retrieve project information in seconds. They find greater business efficiency as they can spend more time on real work, and greater visibility by capturing both sides of the conversation. So if you can move on to the next slide, please. So all of these customer stories you've heard today tie back to the 4 key issues we hear from businesses we talk to that are ultimately the reason they want to purchase an email management solution like Mail Manager. Firstly, they're concerned about the consequences they may face if they were to lose any project information or correspondence. Secondly, they or their team spend countless hours every week searching for information contained in emails, or they're wasting time on admin, like manually filing their project emails. Thirdly, they're concerned that they lack control over the communication that is coming into or leaving the business. And finally, information is trapped in individual inboxes, making it effectively unusable. If you move on to the next slide, please. So with Mail Manager, we give our customers confidence that any email can be filed and retrieved in seconds. Productivity will increase because staff aren't having to spend their time doing administrative tasks. You'll have one central space for all your project information, which allows you to create and maintain that single source of truth. So conscious that we're kind of getting short of time at the end of the meeting today. So what I'll do is I'll share my screen really quickly and give you a quick demonstration as to how Mail Manager can help everyone on kind of a daily basis. So hopefully my screen has come through for you all now. What you're seeing here is the Mail Manager search window. So this is where I go and look for not just my own emails, but all my colleagues' emails as well. So at the top, you can see I'm searching through nearly 400,000 emails. I can search across all those emails in one go by putting in the word BIM, and that's going to narrow down whether the word BIM has been used in the subject line, the body of the text. And it's found just over 4,000 emails in a couple of seconds. That's obviously still too many to go through. So what I can do is I can filter and just see the emails that contain an attachment, 361, and let's just narrow that down to the emails from the last 3 months. So I can see just the 5 emails that my colleagues have been involved in over the last 3 months that have that keyword and that attachment involved. You've got the preview pane on the right-hand side, so you can quickly and easily identify the email that you need to see, even if you weren't part of that original email chain. So that's everything I was looking to kind of cover off today. I know that we're kind of quite close on time at the end of the meeting, but I'll hand back to Justin.
Hugh, thank you very much. Perfect timing. We'll overrun ever so slightly because we have got some good questions. So if Alex and Anne, you can reopen your cameras and turn your mics back on, and we'll just dive into the Q&A. First question is from Aled Morris for Anne and Alex. How will the implementation of Mandate 3.0 cross over into international standards? Talks about BIM not being used in Saudi Arabia. Do you foresee any issues with this implementation outside of the UK? I don't think there's any implication, is there, that it would be outside the UK?
Well, I think because it's based on ISO 19650 at the moment, then it is pertinent and it could be used. And what we are finding is that as the UK BIM framework exists at the moment, the guidance, it is being used in the Middle East. It's been translated around the world, actually, Vietnam, Peru and Chile and Argentina. So it is being used because it's helpful in understanding 19650. What I'd want to emphasize is that what we're exploring and finding is that actually to really get this working, there are people within the built and managed environment who aren't directly impacted, if you're or you know, could follow the clauses of 19650. So what we want to be doing is to explain to the regulators, for instance, and the planners, what's relevant to them and what they can be doing. So that's why the scope of this is bigger than what you'd think of 19650. It isn't as simple as just saying do 19650, but hopefully it would still be relevant and helpful internationally for UK-based companies and for professional institutions. And that will be all part of the collaboration, particularly as we move into a revision anyway of the 19650 series.
Okay. Slightly tricky, argumentative question. What's the point of a mandate if there's no penalty for not adhering to it? And what could be a penalty?
Yeah. And that's why we're structuring the way we are. And that's why government was saying a mandate from them doesn't really work because they haven't got that. So what the idea is that we're getting organizations to sign up to a charter or agreement, and then they mandate it within their organization through specific rules. And that's why we're looking at specific rules. It's fine to have overarching principles, maybe some and specific principles, but then to look at rules so that then it is. And then obviously for that organization, if they have that sphere of authority, it's for them to decide what the punishment would be like. But that's why we are looking at that as an approach. So it's a good and very relevant question.
Okay. When the revised mandate is ready, and I think you highlighted this as the final point, presumably there'll be a big educational / comms effort to the vast number of stakeholders in the public sector client space.
Yeah, and not just the public sector. So, and that's again where we're looking at a roadmap so that depending on where people are in their digital transformation journey, they know how to move forward. So again, it'll be that flexibility of what will be required from an education, from an upskilling perspective. But whether we're looking at education organisations, whether looking at apprenticeships, all of that will be relevant. But of course, it is demanding a lot of resource and time. So again, we can't promise all of that. That's where we need that industry engagement, buy-in and support, as well as government.
Okay. And again, I think you kind of referenced this. Someone says, should we expect the UK BIM framework to evolve as well?
Yeah. So the BSI, NEMA look after that. There's no funding. So potentially what we're asking for is a big ask of what is being supported voluntarily at the moment. So that's where I do have to put a qualification, is that if as industry and government we want this, and there does seem to be an appetite for it, then it does need to be supported. And that's where the roadmap, the implementation plan, if you like, for the framework will be released, to say this is what we can achieve at the moment, this is where we'd like to be. It's almost like the church spire thing, isn't it? Is that this is the funding we need if you want a church spire. If you want this particular stage of and maturity of the framework, this is what we need. So again, we're trying to find out the best way of doing this, and clearly what we can give in the current circumstances, and then what else could be achieved if there was that resource and funding. Is that helpful, Justin? I think that's so.
I think that covers it. I think that covers it. So Tian Palmer asks, can you advise on where we can research the mandate further? Obviously, we've put the link in the chat. We're going to mention that link again at the end of this session.
I think the best thing at the moment is to, if you're interested, do fill in the expression of interest. There will be progressive updates at DCW, UK, CW. The launch in the autumn. We'll certainly be using the NEMA virtual conference, which is the 7th of November, to give the detail. But there will be more and more information coming out. But we don't want to give so much that people are saying, oh, they've made their minds up, because we want to be clear. No, we're in a consultation phase at the moment.
And regular CLC updates as well, Anne. I think that's the other one.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And there's a statement from Margaret Saki. Hello, Margaret. Hi, and Alex. This is a progressive approach and fully support this approach. We in UCL Capital Projects, BIM and BSA Working Group would be keen to come on board. We have in place a BSA assurance framework and a SharePoint solution to help users with tools used with their own MS Office IT tenancy, no new software.
And great. Margaret, lovely to hear from you. And it'll be really good to get your involvement. So I'll reach out to you after the webinar. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, yes, in fact, Margaret's just then actually probably another one at the end. Will the approach be willing to meet with the UCL? So effectively just answered that. So yes. So some questions for Hugh about Mail Manager. Can Mail Manager back up Teams meetings?
Yep. So Mail Manager can file to anywhere within Office 365. So that can be Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive. The idea of Mail Manager is that all the emails are going to stay within your own IT environment. So you kind of decide where that kind of goes from a company perspective.
Does Mail Manager read documents attached to an email?
So we don't read the contents of the documents, but we can see that the email has documents that you can kind of search on. You can search for the type of a document or even the name of the document using our search functionality.
Yeah, okay. How does Mail Manager manage permissions?
Yeah, we just kind of mirror the permissions that you have from your in-house system. So there's no additional requirement to set up permissions through our software. It's really just that we kind of map to your system and copy the permissions across to our system.
Okay. And I think you've kind of answered this one. Where are emails filed through Mail Manager? Yep,
just wherever you want them to be. So wherever within your own IT environment makes sense for yourselves.
And fair enough question, I guess. Is IdeaGen Mail Manager a portal for sending emails or just searching, storing the information?
No, so you still keep on using your own Outlook to send and receive the emails. Mail Manager, in really simple terms, acts as a bridge as a way of filing them centrally and ensuring everybody does file them centrally consistently. And then once they're filed away, giving you a really quick and easy way to search for them as well.
Okay, alrighty. And I think there's a question about can it operate? Is it cloud-based or can it operate within an organization's in-house system?
Yep. So we're just going to fit in with your own IT environment.
Okay. If I just throw one final question at Anne and Alex that we've got here, and then I'll move to wrap up. It seems we missed a huge opportunity to reference 19650 in the Building Safety Act and related regulations. Do you foresee any opportunity to revisit that?
So really great question. We are having conversations, as you would imagine, around that. We're also looking at using that, if you like, as a case study to show actually how following the charter, the mandate can help. So that's where we would be looking, for instance, at the planners, the regulators, what you should be doing to actually fulfill the IM approach, and to then tie it back to the Building Safety Act. So those conversations are happening in the background. Can't promise what will be achieved, but it is a really relevant example, and it has referred to the UK BIM framework in the past. But actually specifying data versus a PDF is, as people on the call will appreciate, is quite different. So there's work to be done around that. Thank you for raising the question.
Okay, alrighty. Conscious of everyone's time, both our speakers and our audience, so I shall clear my throat again and move towards the final slide. One hell of a frog in my throat. Okay, so time to wrap up the webinar. This webinar has been recorded, so you can watch it again or share it on video, share the video with peers and colleagues via the original registration page from probably later today. For more on NEMA, go to wearenema.im. For more on the mandate, as mentioned, you can still find that link in the chat, or there's this bit.ly link that I've put up here, which is bit.ly/EOI mandate consultation. EOI mandate consultation. You can get that there. And for more on IdeaGen Mail Manager, go to mailmanager.com. Our next webinar is on the 23rd of May at 11 a.m. With Mail Manager, entitled Construction Information, How Do You Manage Yours? That's focusing on NG Bailey's development and deployment of their information management tool. So it simply remains for me to say thank you very much to IdeaGen Mail Manager for supporting this webinar. And thank you very much to Anne, Alex and Hugh for your time this morning. And thank you, the audience, for tuning in. Good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Justin.